She didn't knock. She didn't cry. She just looked him in the eye and said, "Please follow me home." And in that moment, Officer Marcus Cole knew this wasn't going to be a normal call. It was the kind of quiet morning that lulled the city into forgetting it had a pulse. The streets of East Hollow barely whispered beneath the roll of tires and the distant murmur of lawn sprinklers. Officer Marcus Cole sat in his patrol car outside a shuttered bakery, the steam from his coffee fading fast in the warm air. He was wrapping up his night shift, reviewing one last report, eyes heavy, his pen barely moving. Then came a knock. Not on his window, on his soul. He didn't hear footsteps, didn't sense movement. Only when he looked up did he see her, a small girl, no older than 7, standing just outside the passenger door. She wasn't crying. Her eyes, wide and steady, held no panic, just a calm urgency that made his heart stumble. He rolled the window down slowly. "Hey there," he said gently, setting the clipboard aside. "Are you okay?" Her voice didn't waver. "Please follow me home." Marcus blinked. "What happened?" She hesitated. Her small hands clenched the edge of her oversized sweater. "My mom. She fell. She's not waking up. She can't breathe good." And just like that, the stillness of morning shattered. Marcus opened the door, crouched to meet her eye level. "Is she hurt? Can you show me where?" The girl nodded and turned, already moving. He grabbed his radio and called it in. Possible medical emergency, child witness, unknown condition. He didn't even finish his coffee. There was no time for coffee now. The girl walked quickly but kept glancing back to be sure he was following. She didn't say another word. She didn't need to. The urgency in her footsteps said everything. They turned off the main road into a worn-out neighborhood, one Marcus had passed 1,000 times but never entered on patrol. The girl darted toward a single-story house with peeling white paint and a string of dim fairy lights still clinging to the porch rail. Marcus barely knocked before pushing the door open. "Ma'am?" he called out. No response. The house smelled faintly of lavender and something sour, like spoiled milk. A couch sat crooked in the living room, with a faded quilt half-draped across it. And there, curled on the floor near the hallway, was a woman. Marcus rushed over. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her chest was rising, barely, labored, her face pale, damp with sweat, her lips tinged with blue. He checked her pulse. Faint, but there. He pressed his radio. "Unit 27, I need EMS immediately to 1422 Fernridge Lane. Female, mid-30s, shallow breathing, unresponsive, minor present, possibly the daughter. Over." The response was swift. Backup was on the way. The girl stood silently by the door, eyes fixed on her mother's body. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Aria," she whispered. "Aria, I'm Marcus. I'm going to stay right here with your mom until the ambulance gets here, okay? She's not alone." Aria nodded, but didn't move. "Is it okay if I sit next to her?" Marcus asked. "She likes that blanket," Aria whispered. "She always says it makes her feel warm when her chest gets tight." He gently pulled the quilt from the couch and laid it over Elise. He hadn't heard her name yet, but somehow it felt like he had. Marcus then sat back, letting the stillness hold them for a few moments. Soon, the faint wail of sirens broke through the silence. Aria didn't flinch. "She hasn't been sleeping," Aria whispered. "She works all night and then gets dizzy." "You did the right thing, coming to get help," Marcus told her. "You probably saved her life." "She didn't want anyone to know," Aria said softly. "She said if someone found out, they might take me away." Marcus's chest tightened. The paramedics arrived and swept in with quiet precision. They worked quickly. Oxygen mask, vitals, a stretcher. One of them paused to glance at Marcus. "She needs to go now." "I'll ride with you," Marcus said. Aria clutched the edge of his jacket. "Can I come?" Marcus nodded. "Absolutely." He scooped her up into the back of the cruiser, buckled her in beside him, and they followed the flashing lights to Mercy General. She didn't cry. She just held his hand the whole way, and for a man who thought he'd seen everything in 20 years on the force, Marcus Cole realized this quiet, brave girl had undone him completely. The waiting room was too cold. Marcus sat with Aria beside him, a vending machine humming behind them, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. A nurse had brought her a juice box, but she hadn't touched it. Finally, a doctor approached. "She's stable," he said gently. "Exhaustion, untreated pneumonia, dehydration. She's a fighter, but she's going to need time." Marcus exhaled. "Can she have visitors?" "Just one for now. The girl can go in shortly." Aria looked up at Marcus. "Can you take me in?" He nodded. Inside the hospital room, Elise looked impossibly small beneath the white sheets. Tubes trailed from her arm, oxygen hissed softly at her nose. Aria climbed carefully onto the chair beside the bed and took her mother's hand. "She came to get me," Marcus told Elise, even though she was unconscious. "She knew what to do." A soft knock came from the door. Nurse. Paperwork. Marcus stepped out to speak with them, but not before glancing back at Aria. The child sat still, fingers curled around her mother's. No tears, no panic, just presence. Later that afternoon, Marcus drove Aria to his own home. "I don't want to go to someone else," she said quietly. "Can I stay with you?" He didn't answer right away. He was a cop. Not a foster parent. Not a caseworker. He didn't know the rules. But he knew this. No child should walk through that kind of morning and end it with a stranger's couch. So, he made a call. His mother, Maggie Cole, opened the door in her gardening gloves and an apron smudged with flour. "What's this?" she asked with a soft smile. "Her name is Aria," Marcus said. "She needs a place to feel safe until her mom gets better." Maggie knelt down, her kind eyes at level with Aria's. "Do you like stories?" she asked. Aria nodded. "Well, come on in. I've got 1,000 of them." That night, Maggie laid a soft quilt on the guest sofa and handed Aria a mug of warm milk. Marcus stood in the hallway, watching. The house was quiet. But for the first time in years, it felt like something had come alive. The quilt smelled like lavender and old summer evenings. Aria curled into its folds as if it had known her for years. She didn't speak much that first evening. Maggie Cole, with her calm smile and flour-dusted hands, didn't press. She just sat beside the little girl, knitting quietly, letting the hush between them settle like dust in sunlight. Marcus stood in the hallway, still in uniform, watching the scene unfold with a tight knot in his chest. He had seen children pulled from worse situations. He had driven them to shelters, watched social workers close the doors behind them, watched them try to be brave. But something about Aria wouldn't let him hand her off to someone else. Something quiet and stubborn had bloomed inside him when she looked him in the eye and said, "Please follow me home." He took a deep breath and stepped into the room. "Want me to make up the spare bedroom?" Maggie asked gently. "I think she's more comfortable out here tonight," Marcus replied. "Fair enough." Aria didn't lift her head, but her eyes tracked him as he crossed to her side. He crouched down so they were face to face again. "Elise is stable," he said softly. Doctors say she'll need to stay a few days, but she's going to be okay. Aria nodded, then looked away. Do you want to call anyone? A relative? A friend of hers? She shook her head. It's just me and her. Maggie's knitting paused. Marcus looked down. All right. Then for now, it's you and us. For the first time since that morning, Aria's voice slipped out, barely above a whisper. Will they let her come home? Eventually, yes, he said. But there are a few things the hospital and child services have to sort out. Are they mad? Marcus hesitated. No. They're just trying to understand. It's their job to make sure both of you are safe, that's all. But we were okay, Aria said quickly. She was just tired. She works so hard. She reads me stories every night, even when her eyes hurt. She's not bad. No one thinks she's bad, Aria. Marcus leaned forward. I think your mom is one of the bravest people I've never met. Aria blinked up at him. She won't let people help her. I know, Marcus said. Some people grow up thinking they have to carry everything alone. He could see Maggie watching from the kitchen doorway, her expression unreadable. That night, Aria fell asleep with the quilt pulled up to her chin and Maggie sitting nearby, softly humming some tune from decades past. Marcus stayed up late in the living room, filling out forms, making calls. The department was understanding, but paperwork was a beast with cold teeth. There were custody waivers, emergency lodging approvals, and endless disclaimers. Around midnight, Maggie brought him tea. She's not the first child to find her way into your path, she said quietly. He rubbed his eyes. No. But she's the first that looked me in the face and asked for me by name, even if she didn't know it. She asked for someone to follow her home, Maggie corrected gently. Not to take her away. That's different. Marcus stared at his cup. I don't know what I'm doing. Maggie touched his shoulder. You don't have to. Just be there. Children don't need perfection. They need presence. The next morning, the scent of cinnamon toast drifted through the house. Aria emerged from the sofa bed like a small, cautious deer, quiet, alert, unsure if the meadow was safe. Maggie greeted her with warm toast, a plate of fruit, and a soft, spoken question. Do you like strawberries? Aria nodded slowly. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. Maggie moved at Aria's pace. Marcus watched it unfold, amazed once again at his mother's quiet gift for building safety out of silence. Later that day, he drove Aria back to the hospital. Elise was awake, groggy, eyes sunken but burning with maternal worry. My baby, she whispered hoarsely when Aria ran to her bedside. I'm okay, Mama, Aria said, wrapping her arms around Elise's waist as gently as she could. Marcus waited outside the room, giving them privacy. He watched the hallway, hands folded tightly, back against the wall. Elise called him in a few minutes later. Her voice was faint, but her eyes were sharp. You're Officer Cole. Yes, ma'am. She told me what happened. That you followed her. That you brought her here. I just did what anyone would do. No, Elise said firmly. You did more. He paused, then carefully added, She told me it's just the two of you. It has been for a long time. I want to help, he said. Elise looked skeptical. They don't just let people keep other people's kids overnight. No, they don't, he agreed. But I talked to my supervisor and to child services. It's all temporary and by the book. My mom's staying with her at the house. She's good with kids. I don't want to lose her. You're not, Marcus said gently. but you do need time to rest, to get well. I don't have time, Elise said, frustration flaring beneath her exhaustion. I work nights. If I don't show up next week, they'll replace me. I already owe rent. I can't. You don't have to solve everything today. No, she said. I had to solve everything yesterday. Marcus knelt down slightly so he wasn't towering over her. Elise, he said slowly, this is not the end. It's just a moment. Let people help you. She looked away, swallowing hard. No one ever stays. Marcus didn't answer that. Instead, he looked over to Aria, who was now tracing little hearts onto her mother's hand with her finger. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. Back at the house, Aria told Maggie everything. About how her mom made tomato soup from scratch when they had nothing but ketchup and hot water. About the nights Elise walked 2 miles after her shift ended because her car had no gas. About the books they borrowed from the church library and read by flashlight when the power was out. She always made things feel like a game, Aria said, even when we had nothing. Maggie didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when Aria finished, Maggie simply said, Your mom sounds like a warrior. That night, Aria helped set the table. She placed the forks carefully, folded the napkins in funny little triangles, and sat between Marcus and Maggie like it was always meant to be. Over dinner, Maggie told her stories about Marcus as a boy, how he once tried to rescue a stray duckling from a storm drain and ended up covered in mud and feathers. Aria giggled for the first time. After dinner, Marcus tucked her in with the same quilt, now warm from the dryer. He paused at the door, uncertain. Can I leave the hallway light on? He asked. Aria nodded. That's what Mama does. He clicked it on. Good night, Aria. Good night, Officer Marcus. He smiled. You can just call me Marcus. She nodded, curling into the quilt. Her eyelids were heavy. Before he left, she whispered, Thanks for following me. He stood in the doorway a long moment after the light faded behind her. The first time Aria smiled without looking over her shoulder, it was because of a garden hose. Maggie had handed her a small metal watering can and pointed to the row of sunflowers that leaned against the backyard fence. They drink a lot in the mornings, she said, her voice as warm as the light coming through her brimmed straw hat. And if you ask nicely, they grow taller just to show off. Aria had laughed. A real laugh, the kind that didn't need permission. And then she began humming as she watered each flower, speaking to them in a whisper, as if they were old friends. Marcus watched from the kitchen window with his arms crossed. He had just come off a long night shift. He should have been asleep. But sleep had been strange lately, too silent, too wide. His mind kept circling the same image, a little girl walking up to his cruiser and saying those 5 words that had rearranged everything. Please, follow me home. Now that home was this place, his childhood house, still creaking in the corners like it remembered being fuller once. Still held together by Maggie's hands, still brightened by the same string of fairy lights that had been up since the winter Aria was born, though no one here knew that yet. When Elise was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, she looked fragile and unsure as she stepped out of the car. She held a brown paper pharmacy bag in one hand, her discharge papers folded and clenched in the other. Aria rushed down the porch steps before anyone could stop her. Mama! Elise crouched as her daughter barreled into her. They held each other for a long time, motionless in the driveway. Marcus gave them their moment before speaking. You feeling strong enough to walk in? Elise nodded, but her eyes flicked toward the house, her body tightening. This isn't... It's temporary, Marcus said quickly. Just until things settle. You don't have to stay long, but you do have to rest. Elise hesitated, then nodded again. Inside, Maggie had made a pot of lentil stew and baked cornbread that still steamed on the tray. She had laid out clean towels, a new toothbrush, and even a pair of pajamas in the guest room. Elise stood in the hallway, clutching her daughter's hand like it was the last rope keeping her tethered. "This is too much," she whispered. "It's just enough," Maggie replied. "Come sit, eat something." Elise sat at the edge of the table, stiff, barely touching her bowl. But when Aria offered her a square of cornbread, "I helped bake it," Elise took a bite. And that was how it began. Not with declarations, but with crumbs. Over the next week, the house began to shift around the four of them. Mornings were quiet but warm. Maggie hummed while tending her garden. Aria drew sidewalk chalk butterflies on the porch. Marcus came and went with his patrol schedule, and Elise spent hours wrapped in quilts on the couch, her strength returning slowly. Aria never left her mother's side for long, but she also didn't seem afraid anymore. Not like that first night. One morning, Marcus found Aria in the hallway with a string of paper hearts she'd cut herself. "Can I hang these in the guest room?" she asked. He knelt down. "You want to decorate?" She nodded. "Mama says a room becomes a home when you leave something behind." Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat. "Then let's tape them up." That evening, after Aria fell asleep, Elise stepped into the kitchen where Marcus was making tea. Her hands were still pale but steadier now. "She's different here," Elise said quietly. "In a good way?" "She doesn't ask me if I'm okay every hour. She plays. She sings again." Marcus nodded. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Elise said. "No one's ever done this for me." "Maybe it's time someone did." She looked away. "Have you talked to social services yet?" he asked gently. She nodded. "A woman named Diane came by the hospital. She asked a lot of questions." "What kind?" Elise hesitated. "About income, housing, my job." Marcus set the tea kettle aside. "They're not trying to take her. They're just making sure you're both okay." "I know," she whispered. "But I can't lose her. She's all I've got." "She feels the same about you." Elise sat at the table, fingers curled around the ceramic mug Maggie had left out. "I wasn't supposed to get sick. I wasn't supposed to miss work. I can't afford to fall behind." "You're not behind," Marcus said. "You're just starting again." That weekend, something changed. Elise, dressed in a soft green sweater Maggie had lent her, stood outside watching Aria chase bubbles across the yard. The fairy lights on the porch flickered gently in the breeze, even though it was broad daylight. "She thinks they're real fairies," Elise said softly, standing beside Marcus. He smiled. "When I was her age, I thought those lights kept monsters away." "Did they?" "Most of the time." Elise exhaled slowly, then turned to face him. "I want to find our own place. Not to leave yet, just to feel like I'm doing something." "You'll get there," Marcus said. "One step at a time." "I've been thinking about going back to school. Maybe get my CNA. Start working at a hospital instead of 3 temp jobs." Marcus nodded. "You'd be good at that." "She wants me to be happy. She never says it, but I see it in her drawings." "She watches everything," Marcus said. "More than we realize." Elise looked at him, eyes soft but cautious. "Do you think this, what we're doing, is too much?" No, he said simply. I think it's just enough. That night, Aria asked for a bedtime story. Not from Elise. Not from Maggie. From Marcus. He blinked in surprise. You want me to read to you? She nodded. Mama said you have a storyteller voice. Marcus laughed and pulled a book off the shelf in the guest room, where the wild things are. He sat beside her and began to read. Halfway through, she stopped him. Do you believe in wild things? What kind of wild things? Ones that come when you're sad, but not to scare you, just to sit with you. Marcus closed the book. I think some wild things are just people who stayed quiet for too long, he said. She looked at him, then nestled under the quilt. I'm glad you followed me. I'm glad you asked me to. The next morning, a letter came. An envelope addressed to Elise Dawson. No return address. Inside, a single page, neatly folded. Elise read it at the kitchen table, her hands trembling by the third line. Marcus saw her face pale and stepped closer. What is it? She didn't speak for a moment. Then she handed him the letter. The words were printed in clean, rehearsed type. Elise, it's been a long time. I've changed. I'm not the man I was. I heard about what happened. I want to help. I want to be part of Aria's life again. Please let me meet her. I think it's time. Adrian Lane. Marcus read the signature twice, then looked up slowly. Who is Adrian? Elise's voice was thin and distant. Her biological father. Marcus's jaw tightened. Does she remember him? No, Elise said. And I never planned to change that. The letter sat untouched on the table for hours. Its words were clean, polite, reasonable. And that made it worse. Elise stared at it like it was a snake coiled under glass, silent, but capable of striking at any moment. She'd tucked it back into the envelope 3 times, only to pull it out again, as if rereading it would somehow change the past. Marcus sat across from her, elbows resting on the table, fingers steepled under his chin. He didn't push. He didn't offer hollow comfort. He just waited until she was ready. Elise, he said finally, voice low. You don't have to face this alone. She looked up, eyes hollow. It's been 5 years. Since he left? Since I left, she corrected. He didn't leave. I took Aria and disappeared. Marcus nodded slowly. Because he hurt you? Her silence was an answer. He wasn't violent at first, Elise said at last. Just sharp. Everything I did was wrong. Aria cried too much. I was too tired. He told me I'd ruin her, that I was unfit, and I believed him for a while. Marcus's hands tightened around his coffee mug. One night he came home drunk. She was 3 months old. He screamed so loud she stopped breathing. I packed a bag the next morning and never looked back. And now he wants back in. Elise gave a bitter laugh. Of course he does, now that we've survived. Marcus took a breath. I can run his name, quietly, see if anything's happened since. I already know, she whispered. He married a lawyer. Big house, clean record. He's the kind of man judges listen to now. And you think he wants custody? I think he wants to own something he lost. They sat in silence, the letter still resting between them. From the living room, the sound of Aria's crayons dragging across paper filtered in. She was drawing a garden, green vines, orange flowers, blue butterflies. Her world was still bright, still untouched by the storm rolling in just outside her view. 2 days later, Adrian Lane showed up at the house. He didn't knock right away. He parked a sleek black car on the street, stepped out slowly, and stared at the porch like he couldn't decide if it was beneath him or too far above. Elise saw him through the window and froze. "Is that him?" Marcus asked quietly. Elise didn't answer. Her hands trembled at her sides. Marcus stepped toward the door. "You don't have to do this." But Elise stood straighter. "I do." She walked outside. Marcus followed, keeping a silent presence just behind her. Adrian Lane looked exactly like the kind of man you'd see in a brochure. Crisp shirt, hair slicked back, smile calibrated for charm. But his eyes were cold, too calculating for comfort. "Elise," he said, extending a hand. She didn't take it. Adrian looked past her, to Marcus. "You must be the officer she mentioned. Marcus, right? Thanks for looking out for my daughter." "She's not your daughter," Elise said sharply. Adrian's smile faltered. "I mean legally," he added smoothly. "We never filed termination papers, Elise. My name's still on the birth certificate." Marcus stepped forward. "You'll need to go through the proper channels." "I'm not here to fight," Adrian said. "I just want to see her, talk to her." "She doesn't know you," Elise snapped.
She hasn't seen your face since she was a baby.
"All the more reason to fix that." Elise folded her arms tightly.
Why now? Why not 5 birthdays ago? Why not when I was sleeping in a car with her because we couldn't get into a shelter?
"I made mistakes," he said. "But I'm not that man anymore." Marcus watched him carefully. Too smooth, too confident, like a man rehearsing lines rather than speaking truth.
And what does your wife think about you wanting to reconnect with your illegitimate child? Elise asked coldly.
Adrian's jaw flexed.
She doesn't know. Not everything.
Elise let out a hollow laugh.
There it is.
"I want to help," Adrian insisted. "Financially, emotionally. She deserves to know her father."
You don't get to show up after 5 years and play hero, Elise snapped.
Marcus stepped in. "You'll need to leave now." Adrian looked at him. Just a flicker of irritation behind the polite facade. "You don't have any legal standing here, officer." "No," Marcus said, "but I'll make a report of this visit and any future ones. You'll need a court order to come back." Adrian hesitated. "You think you can stop me?" "I think we'll let the law decide," Marcus said coolly. "Until then, stay away." Adrian didn't argue. He smiled that polished, empty smile, nodded, and walked back to his car. As he drove off, Elise slumped against the porch railing, her breathing shallow. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked.
"No," she whispered, "but I'm not afraid of him anymore."
That night, Elise lay awake on the sofa while Aria slept peacefully down the hall. Marcus was reading a file on his phone. Adrian Lane's name, his employment history, business licenses, a recent civil suit buried in court records.
"What is it?"
Elise asked from across the room. He looked up. "You were right." "About what?" "He's in trouble. Not criminal yet. But there's a fraud investigation tied to one of his companies. He's being sued for misrepresentation in a merger deal. The court filings are public, but his name's been scrubbed from most documents." Elise sat up straighter.
"You think he's trying to use Aria as a shield?"
Marcus nodded slowly. "Family man, reformed father, good image if you're under fire." Elise clenched her fists.
"I won't let him take her."
"He hasn't filed anything, yet. But we need to be ready." She looked at him, a flicker of panic breaking through her voice.
"What if the court believes him? What if they say he's stable and I'm not?"
"We'll build your case, document everything.
You're working towards stability. You're surrounded by support. I don't have money, Marcus. You have something stronger. The truth. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived by courier. Marcus opened it while Elise held her breath. Inside were temporary custody papers, drafted by a firm in the city. Adrian's name in bold. A request for joint visitation while legal clarity was pursued. Elise crumpled into a chair. It's happening! Aria came running into the kitchen, holding a drawing in her hand. Mama, I made a picture of our garden! She froze when she saw her mother's face. Are you sad? Elise smiled quickly, blinking away tears. No, baby. Just tired. Aria looked at Marcus. Is everything okay? He nodded. We're working on it. She held out the drawing to him. It was of their house. Porch lights glowing, flowers blooming in the yard. 3 figures stood side by side. Elise, Aria, and Marcus. Who's this? He asked, pointing to himself in the picture. That's you, she said. You live with us now. Elise looked up, eyes glistening. You saved us, she whispered. Marcus shook his head gently. You just needed someone to follow. The courthouse paper felt heavier than it should. Elise turned it over again and again in her hands, the legal wording blurring with each read. It didn't say he was taking Aria away, not yet, but it left the door open wide. Too wide. Temporary custodial consideration pending review. Visitation contingent on parental good faith. Stability of current home to be evaluated. Every word felt like a threat dressed in politeness. Marcus stood beside her at the kitchen counter, arms folded, jaw clenched tight. Maggie hovered quietly behind them with a steaming mug of tea she'd long since forgotten to drink. Aria was in the backyard, tracing chalk spirals onto the concrete patio. She hummed softly to herself, crouched beside a drawing of a giant sunflower with smiling bees. The kind of picture only a child could draw with such confidence, as if the world had already promised her that joy was permanent. Elise blinked rapidly. They'll listen to him. He has a house, a job, a wife. Marcus didn't flinch. He also has a paper trail full of lawsuits and red flags. And I have what? A hospital bracelet? A resume full of gaps? You have her, Marcus said. You raised her, protected her. You've never once abandoned her. That counts more than you think. But courts don't care about love, Elise snapped. They care about paperwork. And Adrian knows exactly how to game the system. Marcus gently took the papers from her trembling hands. Then we play a better game. We show the truth. We speak it louder. Maggie stepped forward, placing the forgotten tea beside Elise. And we don't let you face it alone. Elise looked down at the cup, eyes glassy. He always knew I couldn't afford a lawyer. That's why he waited this long, until I had just enough hope to lose. Later that evening, Marcus made a call. His contact, Detective Rourke, an old academy friend now in financial crimes, answered on the second ring. They spoke in clipped phrases, cautious, careful. You're asking if I can dig into Adrian Lane? Rourke said, already typing. Discreetly, Marcus added. There's smoke, Rourke confirmed after a pause. Several shell companies. One of them's under investigation for tax evasion. We've been watching it, but the guy's smart. He uses proxies, second-tier directors. Nothing sticks. But there's a deposition coming up in 2 weeks. Federal interest. And get this, he just filed for divorce. Marcus blinked. From the lawyer wife? Yeah. Apparently she's not thrilled about his extracurriculars. Rumor is she's cooperating with investigators. Marcus nodded slowly.
So this whole custody move, PR shield, Rourke confirmed. Make himself look like a family man while the storm hits. Marcus exhaled. Can you get that deposition on record? I'll try, but you didn't hear it from me. When he hung up, the kitchen was dark. Only the glow of the porch lights cast long shadows across the floor. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching Aria through the screen door. She had lined up her chalk drawings into a garden path, sunflowers, hearts, a little stick figure of Elise and Maggie holding hands. Beside it, a new drawing, Marcus, holding a star. He stepped outside. What's the star for? He asked softly. Aria smiled up at him. It's because you stay up all night, like stars do. He knelt beside her, heart tightening. Do you remember anything about your dad? He asked gently, watching her hands move across the pavement. She shrugged. Mama says he was loud. I think maybe he was sad inside, but didn't know how to be quiet. Marcus nodded. That's a pretty smart way to put it. Are you scared of him? Marcus blinked. No. Because you're a police officer? No, he said. Because I know what's right, and I know what's worth standing up for. She looked at him then, her small face serious. Will you help Mama? I already am. Aria reached over and took his hand. Then I'm not scared either. The next day, Elise received a call from a law office downtown. A woman's voice, polished, distant, confirmed a preliminary custody mediation meeting had been scheduled for the following Friday. Adrian's attorneys had requested joint visitation until the final review. When Elise hung up, she sat very still for a long time. Later, Marcus found her sitting alone in the guest room, holding one of Aria's old baby shoes in her lap. He didn't ask why. He knew. Elise, he said quietly, we need to start documenting everything. She nodded. We'll build a case around stability, Maggie's support, the fact that you've been actively recovering. We'll include character witnesses. I can't afford this, she whispered. You don't have to, he said. I already spoke with a legal aid nonprofit. They're willing to assign someone. She looked up slowly. Why are you doing this? Because when she said, please follow me home, I did. And now I'm here. Elise covered her face with both hands. I don't deserve this. Yes, you do. No, she whispered. You don't know who I used to be. Then tell me, Marcus said gently. Show me. Let's not run anymore. That Friday, the mediation meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room on the 6th floor of a building downtown. Adrian arrived with his lawyer, sleek, suited, and smiling as if the whole thing were a formality. Elise sat on one side of the table, her hands folded tightly, Marcus beside her in civilian clothes. The legal aid attorney, Ms. Corbin, adjusted her notes and began the proceedings. Adrian didn't look at Elise when he spoke. He kept his eyes on the paperwork. I'm here because I want to be part of Aria's life. That's all. She doesn't know you, Ms. Corbin said. And you've made no documented attempts to contact her for 5 years. I didn't know where Elise was, Adrian said smoothly. She had the same phone number for 3 of those years, Marcus interjected. Adrian's lawyer cleared her throat. Let's focus on current intentions. My current intention, Adrian said, is to provide Aria with the support she deserves. A better education, a stable household, legal clarity. Elise stiffened. I'm stable. Adrian raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, your employment history. I raised her alone, Elise snapped. Through nights with no heat, no money, no help. She's healthy, happy, safe. You can't buy the right to show up now and pretend that matters less than your paycheck. Adrian's smile vanished for just a second. The lawyer leaned forward. We're simply requesting supervised visitation at this stage. No, Elise said. Not yet. Not until she understands who you are. And not until the courts investigate your business history. Adrian froze. Ms. Corbin slid a folder forward. We've submitted documents to the judge's office regarding your ongoing legal matters. The state has been notified of a potential conflict of interest. Marcus watched Adrian pale slightly. The lawyer leaned toward her client. We weren't informed of this development. We just filed this morning, Ms. Corbin said coolly. Adrian stood abruptly. This isn't about the past. It's about what's best for Aria. She already has what's best, Elise whispered. He turned to Marcus. Is this your idea of justice? No, Marcus said calmly. It's hers. That evening, Marcus drove Elise and Aria home in silence. Aria had stayed with Maggie during the hearing, building forts out of couch cushions, asking no questions. Elise sat in the passenger seat, her head leaning against the window. Do you think he'll come back? Marcus shook his head. Not the way he planned to. They pulled into the driveway just as the porch fairy lights flickered on. Inside, Aria came running. Mama, I made something. She pulled out a piece of paper, a drawing of their house again, but this time with Maggie and Marcus in the windows, Elise watering flowers, and Aria in the sky above, riding a paper airplane. There's room for everyone, she said proudly. Marcus crouched down. Even me? Aria smiled. Especially you. The courtroom wasn't made for children. Its beige walls and straight-backed chairs, the ticking clock and the solemn gavel, all of it seemed too big, too cold, too final. Aria sat quietly beside Maggie in the gallery, legs swinging just above the floor, her fingers clutching a small stuffed rabbit whose ear had long since unraveled. Elise stood near the table, her palms flat on the wood, trying to still her hands. She wore her best blouse, pressed the night before by Maggie with trembling care, and a pair of flats that didn't quite match, but they were the only ones that didn't pinch her feet. Marcus stood behind her, not as a police officer, but as a guardian, a presence carved from steadiness. His suit jacket was new, borrowed from a fellow officer who wore the same size. It still smelled faintly of pine. The judge entered and everyone stood. Elise's knees wobbled, but she stayed upright. Judge Haynes was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a cautious mouth. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the room, and nodded. This is the matter of Lane v. Dawson. Custody consideration regarding minor Aria Dawson. All parties present? Present, Your Honor, said Adrian's lawyer smoothly. Elise's legal aid attorney, Ms. Corbin, stood as well. Yes, Your Honor. The judge leaned back, lacing his fingers together. Let's begin. Adrian took the stand first. He wore a soft gray suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his wedding band conspicuously absent. He smiled when prompted, spoke clearly, and painted a picture of regret woven with redemption. I made mistakes, he said. I was young. I panicked. But I've worked hard to build stability. I have a home, a business, and I want to do what's right. I want to be in my daughter's life. His lawyer nodded approvingly. The judge scribbled something on a notepad. Then Ms. Corbin stepped forward. You said you haven't had contact with Aria in 5 years. That's correct. You've made no attempt to call, write, or send support during that time? I didn't know where they were, Adrian replied. Elise moved without telling me. Did you hire anyone to find them?
Adrian paused. No. Did you reach out to mutual friends, employers? I assumed they were gone for good. And yet you found them now. Adrian smiled. Fate has a way of giving second chances. Ms. Corbin's voice stayed cool. Or Google does. A ripple of muffled chuckles moved through the gallery, quickly silenced. Elise testified next. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. Not once. I left because I was scared, she said. Because I had a newborn daughter and a man who raised his voice to shatter glass. I worked 3 jobs. I lived in shelters. I gave up everything to make sure she felt safe. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for help. I just asked for peace. Judge Haynes nodded slowly. Do you believe Mr. Lane is unfit? Elise hesitated. I believe he's unfamiliar. And I believe Aria's well-being comes from familiarity, love, and stability, not DNA. Would you allow visitation if the court ordered it? Elise took a breath. Not until she's ready. Ms. Corbin handed the judge a folder. Inside you'll find documentation of Adrian Lane's business dealings, including a pending federal investigation. While he has not been charged with a crime, the nature of the accusations and the timing of his sudden interest in his daughter suggest strategic intent, not sincere parenting. Adrian stiffened. His lawyer objected. Judge Haynes raised a hand. Let's continue. Then came the unexpected moment. The judge looked toward Aria. I see the child is present. Ms. Dawson, does she wish to speak? Maggie gently leaned down and whispered in Aria's ear. Aria looked at Elise, then at Marcus. Then she nodded. A court officer guided her gently to the front. The rabbit stayed clutched to her chest. She was small. The microphone loomed too tall for her. So Judge Haynes stepped down from the bench. He knelt beside her. Hello, Aria. Hi, she said softly. I know this is a big room and there are a lot of adults talking, he said, but I wanted to hear from you. Would that be all right? Aria nodded. Can you tell me who you feel safe with? Mama, she said without hesitation, and Marcus, and Grandma Maggie. The judge smiled. What about your father, Mr. Lane? She tilted her head. He's not my father. Adrian's lawyer shifted in his seat. Do you know who he is? He was loud when I was a baby. Judge Haynes nodded. What do you want, Aria? She looked around the room, then directly at the judge. I don't want a big house, she said. I don't want more toys. I just want people who stay. The courtroom fell into complete silence. I want to be where it feels like home, she added. And where is that? The judge asked. With my mama, and Marcus, and the lady who makes cinnamon bread. There were tears in Elise's eyes now. Maggie wiped hers quietly in the back row. Marcus stayed still, but his throat burned. The judge stood slowly and guided Aria back to Maggie's waiting arms. He returned to the bench and looked at both legal teams. I have heard enough. The ruling came 40 minutes later. In legal terms, it was clear. Custody remained solely with Elise Dawson. Supervised visitation rights were denied, pending psychological evaluation and the outcome of Adrian Lane's business investigation. No visitation was to be granted for at least 6 months, with a review scheduled thereafter. Marcus Cole was approved as temporary legal guardian in the event of Elise's absence, a formality, but one with deep implication. But what mattered more was what Judge Haynes said before he closed the file. Sometimes, a child's voice is the clearest truth in the room. The court's role is to protect that voice, not override it. Afterward, Adrian stormed out of the courtroom. He didn't look back. Not at Elise, not at Aria, not even at his own attorney. Elise stood in the hallway holding Aria's hand, shoulders trembling. Marcus reached for her other hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You did it," he whispered. "No," Elise said, looking down at Aria. "She did." Maggie caught up a moment later, cheeks damp, and pulled them both into her arms. "We're going home," she said. "And tonight, I'm baking something dangerous." That night, the house glowed. The fairy lights twinkled like stars. Maggie's cinnamon bread filled the air with warmth. Aria lay curled on the couch beneath the quilt, rabbit in one arm, drawing pad in the other. She handed her latest drawing to Marcus. It was their house again. Sunflowers and string lights and 3 people standing hand in hand. Elise, Marcus, herself. But this time, there were words written above it in crayon. Family isn't who you're born to, it's who stays when you're scared. Marcus blinked back the sting in his eyes. "Can I tell you a secret?" Aria whispered. "Of course." "I called you Dad in my head today. Just once." Marcus didn't speak. He just reached over, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered, "That's the best name I've ever heard." It began with a seed packet. Aria found it tucked between 2 cookbooks in Maggie's pantry, a forgotten paper envelope labeled wildflowers. She held it carefully in her small hands, as if it were a secret waiting to bloom. "Mama," she said that morning at breakfast, "can I plant something?" Elise looked up from her coffee, eyes soft but tired. "What kind of something?" "A garden," Aria replied. "A real one, with colors and bees and second chances." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "Second chances?" Aria nodded seriously. "Because that's what we're having now, right?" Elise blinked, then smiled, a rare, unguarded smile. "Yeah, baby. We are." And that was how the garden began. They cleared a patch behind the house near the old oak tree. The soil was stubborn, dry in some places, heavy in others. But Aria dug with her small hands and an oversized trowel, undeterred. She wore Elise's sun hat, which flopped over her eyes, and a mismatched pair of rain boots that squeaked when she walked. Marcus helped dig trenches. Maggie showed Aria how to compost eggshells. Elise, for the first time in weeks, laughed without flinching. They planted marigolds and zinnias, sunflower seeds, and lavender sprigs. But most importantly, in the center of the garden, they buried a note. Aria wrote it herself, in purple crayon. "To the new flowers. We were all sad for a while, but now we're starting over. Please grow strong. Love, Aria." She folded the paper and placed it beneath the soil, right where the wildflowers would grow. And from that moment on, she called it the Garden of Second Chances. The days settled into a quiet rhythm. Elise signed up for a certified nursing assistant program at the local community college. It was a small step, but she walked into that campus with her shoulders back and her chin high. Aria returned to school with a letter from the judge affirming her stability, and a sketch of her new family taped to the inside of her backpack. She told her teacher, Ms. Carla, that she now lived with a grandma who made bread, a mom who didn't cough anymore, and a man who fixes things, even without tools. Marcus continued his patrol shifts, but his phone now buzzed with updates from Elise and Aria. Photos of sprouting leaves, lunchbox notes, Elise's first graded quiz with a big red A circled at the top. The cracks in their lives had not vanished. But they were no longer breaking. They were blooming.
One afternoon, as the garden began to sprout in real color, Marcus found Aria sitting cross-legged in the dirt, whispering to a lavender stem. "What you saying?" he asked, crouching beside her. She looked up, smiling. "I told her Mama is getting better, and that we're gonna stay here forever." Did she answer? Aria nodded. She waved. He chuckled. "I must have missed that." Aria tilted her head. "Do you believe in signs?" Marcus paused. "I believe in listening." She pointed to a tiny cluster of yellow flowers. "That's the spot I buried the note." He looked closer. Tiny wildflower sprouts had broken through. She whispered again, "See? They heard me." That weekend, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No envelope. Left carefully on the front porch under a river rock. It was from Adrian. Elise opened it with Marcus standing beside her. "Elise, I won't fight anymore." I said I changed, but I didn't. I said I wanted to help, but I only wanted to fix an image of myself. I watched her in court. I saw the way she looks at you, at him. I thought I could reclaim something, but she isn't mine to claim. Not anymore. I'm stepping away. Not out of punishment. Out of peace. Tell her I hope the flowers bloom. Adrian Elise folded the letter slowly. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she turned to Marcus and asked, "What do you do with forgiveness that comes too late?" He answered gently, "You let it go and plant something better." That evening, Elise sat on the porch steps with Aria, watching the string lights flicker above them. Aria held a cup of warm apple cider, her legs wrapped in the same quilt she had clung to on her first night in the house. "Mama?" "Yeah, baby." "Are we safe now?" Elise looked at her for a long moment. "Yes." "Even if things go wrong again?" Elise pulled her daughter close. "Then we'll find our way back. Every time." Aria sipped her cider thoughtfully. "This feels like forever." Elise smiled. "It is." In the weeks that followed, the garden flourished. Not perfectly. Some days it wilted. A storm took out half the sunflower row. The lavender was stubborn. Maggie's cat trampled the marigolds. But the wild flowers bloomed. They bloomed in crooked, joyful bursts, colors clashing and twisting, nothing uniform, everything alive. Neighbors stopped to admire them. Aria gave a tour to the mailman. Elise painted a little wooden sign that read, "Second chances welcome here." Marcus came home one evening to find Aria waiting for him by the porch. "I made something," she said, tugging his hand. He followed her into the yard. There, in the center of the garden, stood a small wooden post with a nailed-on plaque, hand-painted in shaky lettering, "Planted by Aria, protected by Mama, watched by Marcus." He crouched down to read it again, this time slowly. "You did this?" Aria nodded proudly. He looked up at Elise, who was standing on the steps, arms folded, watching with a gentle smile. Aria tugged on his sleeve. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" Marcus looked at her, then at Elise, and finally said the words he'd been holding in his chest for weeks. "I think we always were." That night at dinner, Aria drew another picture, this time of the garden. She handed it to Maggie with great ceremony. "What's this for?" Maggie asked. "It's for the wall. You helped make it real." Maggie hugged her tightly. "Best thank you I've ever gotten." Elise turned to Marcus. "I used to think we were broken beyond repair." "You weren't," he said. "You were just waiting for the sun." Elise reached for his hand under the table, and when Aria caught them, she only smiled wider. Before bedtime, Aria added one final note to her journal. It was simple. Just 6 words. Some gardens grow from hard places, and beneath it, she drew a small flower. It had roots shaped like hands. It began as a homework assignment. Write about your family, the worksheet said in bold letters, clipped to the top of Aria's yellow folder. Miss Carla, her teacher, had given the prompt without much thought. A simple exercise, she said, to help the children explore gratitude and identity. But for Aria, it wasn't simple. It was everything. That evening, as the wind moved gently through the trees outside their house, Aria sat cross-legged on the living room rug, her pencil hovering above the page. Maggie baked cornbread in the kitchen. Elise studied medical diagrams on the couch, highlighter in hand. Marcus was reading the newspaper, but only half-focused, his ears tuned to Aria's gentle hum as she thought. "Can I write a real story?" she asked, looking up. Elise smiled. "Of course." "Even if it's not what other kids write?" "Especially then," Marcus said. Aria beamed and began. "Dear Miss Carla, you asked us to write about our families. Mine is different. At first it was just me and Mama. We didn't have much, not even curtains. Sometimes no hot water. But we had songs and stories and each other. One day Mama got sick. I ran to a police officer and said, 'Please follow me home.' He did. And everything changed. His name is Marcus. He's not my real dad, but he brings me snacks in his coat pocket, and he reads me stories like he's learning them with me. We live in a house with fairy lights. Mama's healthy now. She's going to be a nurse. We have a garden called the Garden of Second Chances. I planted it after Mama came home from the hospital. I want people to know something. You don't need a big house or lots of money to feel safe. You need people who stay when it gets scary. That's what my family is. Please don't feel sad for kids who come from hard places. Sometimes they grow the brightest flowers. Love, Aria Dawson, or Aria Cole Dawson. We're still deciding." When she finished, she placed the letter carefully in the folder and brought it to the kitchen. "Can I show Ms. Carla tomorrow?" she asked. Elise read the letter twice, hand to her chest, eyes brimming. "You can show the whole world, baby," she whispered. Marcus knelt down beside her. "You really wrote that?" Aria nodded. "You're braver than most grown-ups I know." "I just told the truth," she said simply. The next day, Ms. Carla cried at her desk. She asked Aria if she could read the letter aloud to the class. Aria blushed, but nodded. When Ms. Carla finished, the room was quiet. One boy raised his hand. "What's a garden of second chances?" Aria smiled. "It's a place where things grow after they were almost lost." Later that afternoon, Ms. Carla emailed the letter, anonymized, to a friend who worked at a conference on child development and trauma recovery. By the end of the week, the letter had been read by 50 teachers. By the end of the month, it was printed on the program cover for the National Symposium on Child Wellness in Boston. The heading read, "Please Follow Me Home. A child's voice on what safety really means." When the organizer reached out asking if the family might be willing to share more, Elise hesitated. "We're not a show," she said. "We're just surviving." "You're more than that," Marcus told her. "You're a light." And so, with trembling nerves and Maggie's cornbread muffins packed for the trip, Elise, Marcus, and Aria boarded a train to Boston. At the symposium, the room was filled with educators, social workers, therapists, people who had seen heartbreak up close and spent their lives trying to repair it. Elise was invited to speak on a small panel. She wore a second-hand dress, nervous as she took the microphone. "I thought I had to do everything alone," she said. "I thought asking for help meant I'd lose my daughter. But help came when I wasn't even looking for it. It came in the form of someone who followed us home without judgment." The room was silent. "She doesn't remember the dark parts," Elise added. "But I do. And every time she laughs now, I think, that laugh was paid for with every night I thought we wouldn't make it." A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. A man stood to clap, then another, then the whole room. Marcus didn't speak during the panel, but when Aria handed him a drawing during lunch break, 3 stick figures in front of a microphone, and a banner that read, "Telling the Truth," he quietly excused himself and went to the restroom, where he cried alone for the first time in years. The following month, Elise was offered a position as a patient care assistant at the very hospital where she had once been wheeled in half-conscious, barely breathing. The hiring manager had attended the symposium. "I didn't recognize you at first," she said, "but when I saw the name, I remembered, and I thought, that woman has something the world needs more of." Elise came home that evening with the acceptance letter in her hand and Aria waiting on the porch. "Mama, why are you smiling with your eyes?" "Because I'm standing on ground I used to think I'd never reach." Marcus was offered a promotion, too. Lieutenant. He declined. The captain blinked. "You sure? That's 10 years of climbing." "I didn't become a cop to climb," Marcus said. "I became one to protect." "Protect who?" "My family." That weekend, the garden burst into bloom. The wildflowers, once no more than crayon dreams, now danced in the breeze with chaotic beauty. Aria placed small stones around each one, naming them after chapters in her story: hope, bravery, truth, home. They added a bench to the middle, carved with a phrase Elise had whispered years ago, but only now believed. "We don't just survive, we find each other." And one evening, Aria walked into the living room, her rabbit tucked under one arm, and said, "Can I ask something?" "Anything," Marcus replied. "Can I use your last name too?" Elise paused. "You mean like Cole?" Aria nodded. "I think it sounds good with Dawson." Elise looked at Marcus. He looked at Aria. And without hesitation, he said, "I'd be honored." The paperwork was filed quietly. No big ceremony, no court drama, just a notary, a few signatures, and a little girl beaming from ear to ear. From that day forward, her full name read, Aria Cole Dawson, the girl who asked a stranger to follow her home, the girl who wrote a letter that softened hardened hearts, the girl who showed the world that sometimes the smallest voices hold the biggest truths. They were packing for the park. The air smelled like spring, real spring, not the kind that promises warmth and delivers rain. This was the soft, golden kind that coaxed blossoms out of hiding and made every porch creak with laughter. Maggie had baked cinnamon muffins and wrapped them in a red cloth. Elise packed sandwiches with slices of apple tucked inside. Aria darted between rooms in a flurry of excitement, clutching her favorite sketch pad and her stuffed rabbit with the frayed ear. "Marcus!" she called from the hallway. "Are we bringing the kite?" He leaned out of the bathroom, toothbrush still in his mouth. "Only if you promise not to make it dive-bomb squirrels this time." Aria grinned. "No promises." They laughed, and the sound filled the house like music. The park was a wide green valley just outside town, surrounded by pine trees and dotted with picnic tables and hiking trails. They chose a quiet spot under a giant sycamore tree, spreading out blankets like they'd done it 100 times before. Marcus tossed a frisbee with Aria. Elise sat on the grass beside Maggie, helping slice strawberries. There was no plan,
No schedule, just time and presence. When Aria got tired of running, she flopped onto her back and looked up at the clouds. "That one looks like a turtle," she said. Marcus lay beside her. "Looks more like a pancake to me." "No way," she giggled. "It has a tail." They watched the clouds shift for a while, saying nothing, just breathing in the same air. Then came the moment. It happened without ceremony, without warning. Aria rolled onto her side, rested her head on Marcus's shoulder, and said, "Dad, can you hand me my pencil?" Marcus froze, not in fear, not in confusion, but in something deeper, reverence. He handed her the pencil. She took it like nothing unusual had happened, because to her, it hadn't. To her, it was a truth spoken aloud for the first time. But Marcus couldn't move. He blinked hard, swallowed once. Elise looked over from the blanket, her eyes catching his. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She just smiled softly and nodded. Later, as the sun dipped low and turned the sky gold, Aria sat between Marcus and Elise, sketching their family. In the drawing, Marcus was holding a giant balloon. Elise wore a superhero cape. Maggie had wings. Aria stood in the middle with a crown made of wildflowers. She titled it, "The Day We All Belonged." That evening, back at the house, Elise stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing grapes. She could feel Marcus behind her before he spoke. "She called me Dad." Elise turned around. "I know. I didn't think it would hit me like that." "Did it feel right?" He nodded. "It felt final, but in the best way." She stepped forward and placed her hand gently on his chest. "You've been showing up since the day she found you." It was only a matter of time before her heart caught up to her vocabulary. He smiled, then frowned. "Do you think I'm ready?" Elise didn't answer right away. Instead, she led him to the living room where Aria was fast asleep on the couch, arms curled around her rabbit, sketchbook open beside her. On the page was another drawing. It was the four of them, Elise, Aria, Maggie, and Marcus. Above their heads floated 4 stars. Underneath, in uneven lettering, "My forever people." Elise whispered, "I think you've been ready for a long time." The next morning, Aria climbed onto Marcus's lap as he sipped his coffee on the porch. "Do you think rabbits understand people?" she asked, holding up her stuffed toy. "Of course," he said. "They just speak in hops." She giggled. "Then I better learn hop language." "Maybe you already know it." She looked at him, suddenly quiet. "Are you sad today?" He blinked. "Why would I be sad?" "You looked at me funny last night." He paused. "I think I was just surprised." "Because I said Dad?" He nodded. "Was that okay?" He swallowed. "More than okay." She leaned her head against his chest. "Mama told me I could wait. That I didn't have to say it until I was sure." "And are you?" Aria looked up at him. "You followed me home. You stayed. You never yelled. You made pancakes when I had a fever, and you let me draw on your arm with marker." He smiled. "It took a week to wash off." "You were my dad before I said the word. Now it just feels official." Marcus exhaled, a knot in his chest untying itself. He wrapped his arms around her and said, "Then I'll keep earning it. Every day." That afternoon, Elise called the courthouse. "I want to file the petition," she said, "for full guardianship rights." The woman on the phone asked her to confirm the name. "Elise Dawson," she said, "and the man's name is Marcus Cole." Father of the child? Elise looked out the window where Aria was sitting in the garden, sketching a new flower and laughing with Maggie. She smiled. Yes, she said. He is. The next few weeks passed with soft joy. Elise moved into part-time hours at the hospital, balancing work with school. Maggie started a recipe blog featuring garden-grown meals for healing hearts. Marcus added a small tool shed to the backyard and painted it blue because Aria said it looks like calm. Every evening they sat together at the table, sometimes with candles, sometimes with mismatched plates, but always together. One night, Aria raised a toast with her apple juice. To my mom, and my dad, and my grandma, and to anyone who ever felt like they didn't belong. May they find people who follow them home. They clinked glasses. No one spoke for a while after that. A few days later, Marcus received a small package in the mail. Inside was a keychain, just a plain silver tag, engraved with one word, Dad. No note, no sender, just the word. He showed it to Elise. She blinked fast, nodded, then quietly placed it on the hook by the front door. That night, as Marcus tucked Aria into bed, she yawned and whispered, "Do you know what my favorite sound is?" "What?" "When you laugh." He chuckled. "Why?" "Because it makes the house feel safe." Marcus kissed her forehead. "You made this house safe first, Aria." She closed her eyes. "I love you, Dad." He sat there a while longer after she slept, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars she had taped to her ceiling. And he knew. He wasn't filling in for anyone. He was exactly who he was meant to be. The courthouse was quiet on the morning of the adoption hearing. There were no crowds, no cameras, no drama. Just a room with polished wood, rows of empty benches, and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. But to Aria, it felt like a palace. She wore a yellow dress Elise had bought with her first full paycheck from the hospital. Maggie had tied a ribbon in her hair. Marcus wore a blue tie that Aria said matched his calm face, and Elise held a small bouquet of sunflowers, the ones that first bloomed in the Garden of Second Chances. Their case was the last on the docket. And when Judge Haynes, yes, the same one from the custody hearing, walked in, he smiled the moment he saw them. "Back again," he said gently. Elise nodded. "Hopefully for the last time." Aria sat straight in her seat, holding her stuffed rabbit like it was a sacred artifact. Her feet didn't reach the floor, but she swung them anyway, the heels of her shoes thumping softly against the chair legs. Judge Haynes looked over the papers, then back at them. "Marcus Cole," he said. "You are petitioning for legal adoption of Aria Dawson?" "I am," Marcus said. "And Elise Dawson, you are consenting as the biological parent?" "I am," she said. "And Aria," the judge said, turning to her with a twinkle in his eye, "do you know what this means?" Aria nodded. "It means I get to keep him." Laughter rippled through the room. Even the clerk smiled. The judge leaned forward. "Do you want to?" "Yes," she said. "Forever." He turned back to Marcus. "Why do you want this?" Marcus didn't pause. "Because she called me Dad before I earned it. And I promised myself that day I'd never stop earning it. Because she trusted me when I didn't even trust myself. Because I followed her home and found my own in the process." Elise reached for Marcus's hand. Maggie wiped a tear from her cheek. Judge Haynes picked up his pen. "Then, by the authority vested in me by the state of Georgia, I hereby grant this petition.
Aria Dawson shall henceforth be known as Aria Cole Dawson, daughter of Marcus Cole and Elise Dawson. The gavel struck once, simple, final, holy. Aria turned to Marcus, wide-eyed. So, it's official now? He nodded. Like, on paper? On paper, in heart, everywhere. She launched into his arms. He caught her like he always had. Back at the house, Maggie lit a candle in the window. Not because it was dark, but because she believed every home needed a flame on the day something sacred began. Elise made pancakes for dinner, because that's what Aria had chosen, and Marcus let her pour the syrup even though she always poured too much. They ate around the table as a family. No guests, no cameras, just warmth and the echo of a promise kept. Later that night, Maggie took a photograph in the garden. Elise stood on the left, arms around Aria's waist. Marcus stood on the right, his hand resting lightly on Aria's shoulder. Maggie held the camera steady and whispered, "Say home." And they did. She printed the photo and placed it in a frame. On the back, in her handwriting, she wrote, "We didn't just survive. We found each other. We stayed. We became." The Cole Dawson family. 1 week later, Elise came home from work in her new pale blue scrubs, a hospital badge clipped to her chest. Aria ran to the porch to greet her, waving a piece of paper. "What is it?" Elise asked. "It's my new family tree," Aria said proudly. "Want to see?" The paper showed hand-drawn roots at the bottom, labeled Love and Second Chances. Above, 3 branches. One said Elise. One said Marcus. The third was Grandma Maggie. "Where's you?" Elise asked. Aria smiled. "I'm the trunk. I hold us together." That Friday, Marcus was called back to the police station. His captain handed him a letter. It was a commendation, recognition for his service, not just in the line of duty, but in the line of humanity. The mayor had read Aria's story. So had the department's ethics board. They offered him a new title. Not lieutenant, not sergeant, but community liaison officer, a new role created just for him. "Someone who doesn't just protect neighborhoods," the captain said, "but restores trust because of how he followed a little girl home." Marcus accepted, not because of the title, but because it gave him the chance to help others like Aria, and Elise, and himself. Summer passed gently. Aria grew taller. Her wildflowers climbed higher than ever. Elise passed her CNA exam with a perfect score. Maggie opened a small community baking class, and Marcus, on his day off, built a wooden swing in the backyard, just for Aria. One afternoon, she sat on that swing and said, "Do you think we'll stay here forever?" Marcus looked around, at the porch lights that had flickered faithfully every evening, at the garden now lush and loud with bees, at Elise, who was hanging laundry with a quiet hum, at Maggie, pulling cornbread from the oven. Then he looked at Aria. "You don't have to live in one place forever," he said, "but some people, you carry them forever." She nodded thoughtfully. "I'll carry all of you, even when I'm a grandma." He laughed. "Deal." That night, Elise tucked Aria in as the sky turned dark. "Want a bedtime story?" she asked. Aria shook her head. "Tell me about the day you knew everything would be okay." Elise thought for a moment. "Probably the day you let go of my hand in that courtroom," she said. "But I came right back," Aria whispered. Elise kissed her forehead. "Exactly." Down the hall, Marcus looked through Aria's drawings on the refrigerator. One caught his eye. A crayon drawing of 4 figures under a rainbow, all holding hands. Above them were 3 words, not the end. And underneath, in tiny letters, just the beginning. He smiled, because it was true. Because some stories don't end with a gavel. They begin with 5 words. Please follow me home. Some stories are born from chaos. Others are born from silence. But the ones that stay with us the longest are born from small, brave acts, like a little girl walking up to a stranger and asking, "Please follow me home." This wasn't a story about saving. It was a story about staying. About how love is not something we inherit. It's something we choose every day, in small, quiet ways, in the warmth of a porch light, the comfort of a quilt, the soil of a second-chance garden. Elise found her strength not when she stood alone, but when she allowed others to stand with her. Marcus didn't become a father the moment Aria called him dad. He became one the moment he followed her without question. And Aria, with nothing but her voice and her truth, reminded us all what family really means. Not perfection, not biology, just presence, and people who stay. To everyone who followed this story, from the first step to the last, thank you. Thank you for believing in stories where gentleness wins, where broken doesn't mean ruined, where chosen families are just as real, sometimes even more so, than the ones we're born into. If this story moved you, made you cry, smile, or believe a little deeper in quiet heroes, I invite you to share it. You never know who might need it. And if you are someone still waiting to be followed home, still waiting for someone to stay, hold on. They're out there. And maybe, just maybe, they're already on their way. With love and gratitude, the author.